Good evening. We'll call this work session, School District 105 work session to order. We have a quorum. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Historically, I'm too quiet. They tell me to speak up, so I'll speak a little bit.
Is there's Julian's, Derek Jerry on the screen.
Yeah. So Rachel Amos and Josh Cook are joining us virtually, so both business managers are here. The work session tonight. Work sessions, remember, there's no action occurs. We don't have anything on the agenda that we're going to be voting on. But this is an opportunity for the school board to learn about topics that may be coming up in regular board meetings that they may need to take action on. So these work sessions are primarily designed to be for education and information for the board members. The topics for tonight, we have some furlough days coming up, so informing the school board members what those furlough days are and asking any questions that are associated with that. There's probably some opportunity tonight to review the questions that you board members have been getting from members of the community. Perhaps they've been calling, asking questions, or they run into you out and about. Answering any questions you're hearing so that you feel better equipped to give some of the answers and help those constituents out with what they're asking you about. So I think that would be the focus of where we're trying to go tonight. Should we start with questions? Do you want to hear a general synopsis of kind of what got us here? How do you want to do this?
Well, I think we all know what got us here. But what I would like to do is, have you and Rachel and Josh developed a starting point of where we're gonna start meeting the decline in what we gotta take away from the budget?
Because we received a adjusted budget number from the state, and we're basically on notice that we have a much more significant reduction to next year's revenues than we anticipated, we have to do two things. First thing we need to do is we need to make sure this year we finish in the black. We're not allowed to operate schools on the negative. We must operate in the black. And we need to make sure that there is enough reserve carryover money to open school. We don't receive a school payment quickly enough at the start to make payroll so we have to save enough money in reserve so that we make our opening payroll when the staff return in the fall. So
how much reserve is required?
310, 350 is probably bare minimum. It will depend a little bit on how many staff we have, the cost of those staffs and factors.
Okay.
But I think 310, 350 is the absolute bare bones minimum we have to have in bank. The other thing that we have to do is, besides furloughing days this year to keep that reserve, we have to have a good plan about reducing costs through programs, staff, and systems, so that we can operate under what our new revenue level is. We know we're going to have a reduction. We're going to have to reduce all of our expenditures and costs down to stay within that level so that we can operate schools correctly and not run into ups and downs. And we don't want to do any more furlough days. So we need to make some reductions, layoffs, control some of our program costs, some of our system costs, so that we live within the new expected revenue. Josh and Rachel, please jump in at any point, but right now, just next year is be a $1.4 million reduction. part of that is we're going to need to borrow some money from revenue this year and pay it back next year. So it looks like 1.6 in reality, but just next year as a standalone entity, revenues in, if we continued operations, we would need to make a $1.4 million cuts, reductions to operate within the new revenue amounts.
Can you talk a little bit about what the overall budget looks like, so people have an idea of like what that piece of the pie is
At the state level or at our level?
at our level?
Rachel and Josh, please jump in, but right now, we've operated about $10 million of state school fund.
Mhm.
And is that about half of our overall operating expenses? The other half is, I call them grants, but student investment account, IDEA, all the other areas where money comes in that tend to be a lot more directed and controlled in what you're allowed to make expenditures there.
The state school fund, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
State school fund is roughly 5 or 6 million, depending on what our numbers are. Our overall general fund budget is between 9 and 10 million. And then the overall budget itself is 18, 19, depending on if we have seismic grants and so forth.
Thank you.
Also, I want to say that when we're talking about a budget reduction of $1.4-ish million for next year, this isn't going to be like a continued reduction moving into year after year. We budget every year to end the fiscal year at $1 million. And because we're pushing down to a 0 ending instead of $1 million, we need to make sure when we're budgeting for next year that we are budgeting at that level so that we continue to trend towards that million so that we don't continue having, million plus budget reductions. Does that make sense?
We need a plan of savings.
Yeah, but in the position we're in right now, what's it gonna take to do that? Because it doesn't looking at what I've been looking at for the future from the state, it doesn't look like we're gonna climb back up there anytime soon from the state. So where are we gonna?
Our climb is going to come from the way we spend money. We're going to have to spend a little less money and keep a little bit more of a plan to build into that savings. Let's call it a savings, I guess, or ending fund balance. We're not going to trend to spend all of our money next year. We're going to trend so that by the end of the year, our revenues, our monthly payments will have that ending fund balance returned. So,
but if we don't return to what we're giving, and we continue to keep getting less because of whatever grants, state money, property tax, whatever, and we don't want to lose any more programs or staff, how are we going to do that? What's the long range goal, or what's the dream?
if we're operating at 100% right now, we're going to have to start operating at 85%. We're going to have enough overall program cuts, staffing cuts, system cuts to reduce the rate of our expenditures and the total amount of our expenditures, and plan to have a little bit of this reserve returned so that we operate with an ending fund balance that we're supposed to have. We are going to see a reduction in the overall number of things, number of people that Reedsport School District is experiencing this year when we operate next year.
So is the largest cost, like biggest bang for the buck, salaries?
Salaries and benefits, Rachel, about 65%, about 15% ESD contracts, about 10% transportation. So those are some of the big ticket items.
So to get to that level, we're gonna have to lay teachers off and then shrink class sizes, reduce programs.
Program expenditures, laying off teachers probably increases the class sizes. Just what we
Instead of getting rid of classes because we
Or
don't have
cutting classes.
a team.
Yeah, cutting classes. And while we have a general sense of what it takes to make reductions, we don't know which ones we're doing just yet. When we're talking about that, there's a superintendent admin meeting on Thursday. Business manager and I are looking at what kind of is the big effort. Generally speaking, one way to do it is you cut one entire program entirely out and hopefully you regain enough money, but that's an entire element of what you offer now, as opposed to taking a little bit away from each of the programs, shrinking those down so that we generally operate the same way we are this year with some just smaller reductions
So
overall.
what is our job? To approve the budget, that you decide where the cuts go?
Okay, May 8th, you're going to have a budget committee meeting, and there's going to be 10 of you. And the business manager is going to bring a proposed budget to you at that time. And we've got a couple of weeks to have that assembled, put together. And at that point, we're saying, this is what we think it's going to take to operate next year. It is the purview of that budget committee to say, you know what, John, area here needs to double. We're going to take some more cuts out of all the other areas because the area needs to be bigger. They don't dictate who in the area we're doing or the actual expenditures, just at the very top level, the highest level of operation, you know, to indicate you need more money in curriculum or you need more money in social emotional concepts or in contracted services, whatever it is. Then, once that budget committee has made its updates or pushed forward the proposed budget, then it returns to the school board for an adoption. So you can't adopt it till we've had that input from the community. That's why we have the extra members, and that's that process.
Okay. How many teachers are there?
We have about 100 staff and just under 50 teachers.
So just to reiterate, we have a budget committee formed from community members that we have a very hard time getting people to join. And I'm saying that for the benefit of the community. When, you know, we talk about responsibility and we talk about oversight and transparency, I put the call out, you know, I'll ask 100 people. I'll get one person who says they'll show up to help set that budget for the next year.
Yeah.
And that's, frankly, I find that very disappointing. You know, that you can ask a bunch of people to help with this. You don't get any takers or very few takers. And then you hear a bunch of flack from your community about how, you know, well, where's the oversight? What, you know, what are you doing? So I just want to say, hey, you know, we really try to get as much input from community members as we can.
Yeah.
Every year.
In my history here in the district, we have struggled to fill our budgets committee member seats. One thing that bears repeating for this process, and how I can kind of address the timeline. This was a surprise. This surprised more districts than Reedsport. At a statewide level, we know that Portland Public, Salem Kaiser, Beaverton, Bend, Silverton, Bethel, big districts around us with arguably large business manager departments of people full-time paying attention. They didn't see this coming. When the formula is shuffled through and calculated, and you surprise some of the biggest school districts with the outcome, there's a problem. And Rachel spoke to this a little bit last night. As a business manager, CFO of PSD, she has a lot of history of communication with the Department of Education, with Oregon, and has noticed a downward trend in the type of communication, the value of the communication. It hasn't gone well. So this isn't just a Reedsport thing. Obviously, we care about Reedsport. That's why we're here having a conversation. But this isn't just something that got overlooked or a mistake or an oopsie. This was a bigger problem, and we have to deal with it at our end, but it wasn't a fault.
When was the last time it happened?
Rachel, any history on 08? Although that was a different type of recession.
Yeah. I want to say that there was, it was more in 10 than 08. 08 was kind of the recession of the economy. But then as far as furloughs and so forth, we were talking probably about 2010 to 2012 or so. I can remember the first school district that I worked in, their enrollment dropped down so far that they, you know, they were like having to itemize each pencil that they were giving out to a teacher in a classroom because the supply budget was nil. I mean, they were tightening the reins pretty, to the extreme at that time. Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of factors, like John was saying, that I was sharing last night. There was an individual in the Department of Education who was the manager of the state school fund and keeping things balanced. And he is one of the most brilliant people that I have ever met in my life. I remember sitting next to him in a meeting, talking to him, and he was typing probably, it felt like 300 words a minute while his face was turned towards me, asking me questions, not looking at a screen, not doing anything. And he can compartmentalize things so well. He communicated all of the time. The data sets were always up to date and accurate. They were never falling behind. And, you know, rightfully so, he was promoted and a new person came in just prior to COVID. And we saw some issues with the state school fund balancing and getting things on track, and there being some errors. And then just recently, I believe a year or so ago, another changeover of the state school fund. And just last week, there was a state school fund estimate that came out for the current year. And it showed one of my districts that I'm working with a negative adjustment in one of the grants that are part of the state school fund. And I said, please verify for me why this is a negative adjustment when we haven't even been paid on this grant yet as part of the state school fund. Oh, that was an error. We're working on it now. So, you know, when they told us in mid-March that they sent out state school fund estimates, but then they said there was some data set errors and to be expecting a corrected amount, and then there was not much change to the corrected amount. You know, we're just kind of on pins and needles. Like, is this really the real number? Is this not really the real number? So asking a ton of questions, but so far we've been assured that this is confirmed numbers for us. But what I was trying to convey to the staff last night was, you know, before, when we had the security of constant communication and any changes and fluctuations and being prepared for them, to now where we get very little communication. And then when we do get communication, it seems like there are things that aren't quite right. It's unnerving and trying to do our job and trying to project and estimate for our districts.
Rachel, I'm sorry.
No.
I talked to a school board member today from another school district, and the only thing out of his mouth was staff and salaries. Me personally, and I'm not speaking for the board, I'm talking me personally, I got upset at that. I don't want that to happen. I want us to, you know, I want us to delve into this and find whatever. I mean, if we have to go 5 or 6 different directions so we can save as much staff as we can, that's what I'm hoping we do. And I know it's going to be, you know, a pain in the posterior for you and Josh, and John, but I just don't want to swipe the top off it and be salaries and lose staff. I want us to delve into this where we can, you know, spread this out clear across the board and save as many people as we can. I mean, I know that might be a dream, but you know, I'd like to see it try and be it doable.
To piggyback on what Terry said, Rachel, if we do have to cut staff and employees or staff and teachers, let's make sure that it's not 2 in a household. I'm sure there's multiple people that have 2 parents or 2 employees of this district. We don't want to cut them both. You know, if they have to go, then only make it 1. You know what I mean?
I do, yes, but I just want to be very clear here that Josh and I have no say in what happens for the reductions. That we are contracted employees, we cannot make those decisions for the district. We can advise on where the most savings would occur, but it is not going to be up to us what happens with the staff. For sure, that's going to be your administration.
One of the things
Also, sorry, one more thing. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Jones, and I completely agree. And the part of the work that Josh and I have been doing as far as trying to get the budget and looking at where we can push things into grants, where we can look at using reserves and so forth. We were already on a budget for this year where our discretionary funds, which is like our supply budgets and so forth, we're at minimum levels anyway. So there's not a lot of fluff that are built into those numbers to be able to try to absorb some of the budget shortfall in those areas. We will do everything we can to look at those and make recommendations based on that. But some you have to have a budget in. You know, you have to have custodial supplies to keep your doors open. You have to have your utilities paid and things like that. So we are looking at essential functions, and there isn't a lot of room left over. So that's why a lot of the conversation has been on the programs and the staffing side.
two aspects of this that I think we talked about in the previous year, that we had staff put into ESSER, and we knew, and we've been working this entire year with an awareness that we did need to trim staff. We knew that, and we were going to be able to gently kind of work through attrition and make sure that those changes were being taken care of until this abrupt adjustment came along. And so we were already in a point where we were focusing on where's our attrition, where can we not hire something back and try to continue and trim down those positions that were in the ESSER monies. Another way besides furloughing that you make drastic adjustments to control your costs is you lay people off. The numbers of layoffs that we would have to do to get to a satisfactory position would also close the doors. When we have 6 people gone from a building, and when people were sick and illnesses, 6 people, we would shut the school for a day because we couldn't operate without enough staff. And if we lay off to save the money, we will also be closing the schools for 2.5 months. We won't have the staff to operate. The furloughing is harsher, affects everybody, but it is fewer days of instructional impact versus laying off, which would be the other way to control those costs. When we learned March 28th was the day that the adjustment came out. Josh and Rachel and I had a regularly scheduled meeting on April 3rd. I think this is like a Thursday and a Tuesday. So there's a weekend in there. So it's not 5 days. It was a couple work days later. John, the business manager, we're going to go over this. And I saw the light bulb go on in Rachel and Josh's head when they were looking at this adjusted number going, oh, wait a minute. And we had some conversation at this April 3rd meeting. They went back home over the weekend and went through the entire budget. Every single grant, every single expenditure. Is that encumbered item really going to happen? Or can we say that that money is realized? And went through everything, start to finish, our entire budget. Came back on the 8th, came back on the 6th, the Monday, and said, John, it's $1 million that we're gonna have to cut next year.
8 was Monday.
And what?
8 was Monday.
8 was Monday?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
You're okay.
Okay. So they came back on the 8th and said, after the weekend, said John's gonna be $1 million in cuts next year. We've gone through everything. We still have a little bit more to do. By that board meeting day on the 10th, it was $1.4 million. And we need to do something now to end the school year with enough money to open next year. The speed on the 10th of meeting with administrators, making sure that expenditures that Josh and Rachel were double checking, we had to ask some questions, calling the ODE, what does this do instructional hours, reading through the collective bargaining agreements, what are our requirements to our associations. I had just enough time to tip off the 2 union presidents, attend the meeting, pay attention, your folks are gonna have questions, and then you guys heard the business manager report at 5:30. So basically, everything happened on April 10th. Not quite 2 weeks and maybe 7 work days after the report even came out, and maybe 5 days after we knew. I mean, they went through everything in that week, April 3rd through 10th, and we've considered everything,
So
and it's hard.
to reiterate, in real time, work was being done constantly. As soon as the realization that there was a problem happened, the business managers hit the ground running, trying to figure out a way that we could best keep the doors open this year, next year. So I think that's one of the misunderstandings that I'm hearing from people in the community is that, well, what's been going on, that there's this thing happening that we don't know about. You know, there's this assumption that these numbers were realized and worked through, before. So I appreciate that schedule, knowing that Rachel, Josh, and yourself have been working as diligently as you can, nonstop, for the last 2.5 weeks, basically.
How many teachers and staff that we have that have retired but come back to work for us? How many? Are you looking at those numbers as far as the ones that we're gonna, might cut or?
Okay, we don't look at the names of who we're cutting. The old collective bargaining agreements have a lot of language about seniority, essentially hire dates. And when we get to a point of saying, okay, 15% out of this program, 15% out of this program, 50% out of this program, looking at the staff who work in those programs may not be as simple as 15% cuts off of the bottoms, because hiring dates, everybody in this department here may be brand new, and people you would have to look to cut over here have seniority and are going to fill some of those open positions, bump people because of language in those collective bargaining agreements. We're going to have to work super closely with human resources. There are some state laws that will impact how we make the decisions for staffing, and there's a lot of language in the 2 collective bargaining agreements that will direct that. So programmatically, in big number decision levels, we're going to decide where can we make some of these trims, but then bargaining unit language is going to direct a lot of the actual action.
And your partners are your labor representatives. I would assume that they are talking with their stakeholders, the staff, and representing them and kind of working through, so that we're trying to, at least, I would hope that we were trying to partner with them.
The 2 union presidents and I all weekend are
Okay.
constantly in communication.
Okay.
They get a question from somebody, to the ability I can to answer it immediately, or I add it to the list of questions and we get to it. They've done a very good job of funneling concerns and elements that they're hearing back to me, protecting their association, but make sure that they're represented. So it's been very good communication, in my opinion, so far. I think they might echo that.
And to reiterate, you're putting those questions on the website, the district website. Once you come up with answers, you are trying to get those questions and answers out there.
Yeah, we are trying to archive everything that we put out in print to the website. We have a tab called furlough information. because if a person misses a meeting, they can go back and watch the video recording of the meeting. If questions have come in, we try to get those posted so they can review it. We've had 2 staff meetings. This now is a public meeting. I had a meeting with a group of IAs who wanted time with me. Had a lot of individual conversations, a lot of text messages, a lot of phone calls. A few people from the community have spoken to me. Charmin is going to try to help me get a public community Q&A where I'm just going to try to do my best to address the random questions that pop up. I'm pretty committed to, as long as people have questions, that we help them understand the answers and how long that takes.
So the meeting on May 8th, the business meeting, we're gonna have a plan of what Josh and Rachel's recommendations are. So we're okay through the end of this school year. We have to make the plan for the beginning of next year. So we're not gonna furlough people this year.
The furlough is this year,
It is.
so that we can end the year with
In
enough
place.
money to start
Okay,
in September.
okay,
The budget meeting will be next year's plan
Gotcha.
to spend down or reduce our expenses.
so the furloughs that we have to do this year have to come to the $1 million or the 400?
Rachel and Josh, we're furloughing 8 days is $256,000, borrowing a bit of our ending fund balance, and that will get us through and allow us to open in the fall.
And that's furloughing everybody.
Everybody, including me.
So then do we have to make up the 8 days next year at school, or how does that work?
Instructional hours. There were enough hours in our instructional calendar to furlough up to 6. By going to 8, we have exceeded, we are not going to have enough instructional hours with our freshmen, sophomores, and juniors by 13. They're going to fall 13 hours short of their state level requirements. K-8, we have enough, and seniors, we have enough hours with these 8 days being furloughed. Now, that's a state minimum. We have always gone over the minimum. We try to provide as much education as we can. There is still a recognized loss of instructional time through 8 days. Just at the what you have to do minimum, those 3 grade levels will be impacted by 13 hours. The short answer to what do we need to do, every fall we do our Division 22 report. Where did you fail? What's your corrective action plan? We'll have to turn ourselves in and say, we did not meet our instructional hours for those 3 grade levels. Our action plan is we reduced our costs so that we don't have to furlough, and we don't want this to happen again. Short version. Initially, they talked about, I have to go to the State Board of Education and make a report, and that was incorrect. They said, you just turn yourself in on your Division 22 report and hold yourselves accountable to your constituents.
Are all the, I'm sorry, Terry.
Go ahead.
Are all the South Coast schools in this position?
North Bend is making cuts. Coquille has cuts to make. Coos Bay's been making cuts all year.
What about Elton?
I don't know. Elkton and Sayusala
Oh,
are
they're-
ESDs. I could research. Those are 2 I don't know as local neighbors. An interesting problem right now is the Jervis School District is struggling so much that they're trying to put a bond together for their May election. If they don't, they'll have to shut their district down and merge it into a bigger one, Woodburn.
Wow.
Bethel and Eugene is closing as well,
Yeah,
right? They're
Bethel has to
closing
close a school,
a school.
an entire
Right,
school
right.
though.
The
That really
Jews
has
gonna
students
have
that
to
are
close the school.
consolidated.
They are.
I heard from a teacher today from Elkton this morning that Elkton's enrollment's up enough that they're not going to be in a situation all the rest of them are. Sayusala, from what I understand from a parent up there, that they were informed that they're just almost just as bad off as we are. So You know, and they've had a lot of expenditure with new schools, new things and stuff, so.
We
But
lose,
yeah,
we
Elkton
lose
and
students. because-
Elkton and Bandon seem to be kind of weathering the storm a little better than everybody else, and Myrtle Point's in a world of hurt. They're, I almost think they're, from what it sounds like, they're a little worse off than we are, so.
Oh, okay.
I have a South Coast Soup meeting this Thursday, and that's probably agenda item number one for all of us. The three probably key things to know when people are talking about what happened, why, what's it going to take to come back up. The one, this crazy math formula that determines how we get paid. One of the numerators that multiplies through is the average year's experience of your teaching staff. After COVID, we've lost about 5 years on our average, meaning that retired teachers, veteran teachers, lots of experience have left, and we fill it with younger people. But our year's experience in that numerator as a multiplier went down. Another thing that went down is our enrollment, probably 20, 25 kids. So that is a numerator multiplier has gone down. Somehow, and this is the part I don't understand, and this is part of what I think that the surprise is, Oregon has seen a reduction in students post-COVID of about 10,000. And somehow that factors into the formula. And if those kids aren't there, less money is paid out overall. So while all of us probably were kind of ready and trimming things down and kind of aware of this, the sudden abrupt nature of this has something to do with that formula. Formula's impacted that 10,000 kids. Rachel or Josh, correct me or add to that.
Yeah, they have set aside money in the state school fund in anticipation of students returning, so that there would be funds available to give ADMW for those students. So I don't have any insight of when they are going to stop doing that and really settle on this is our number, or if that has affected next year or anything like that. I don't know, but that was what they had decided right after COVID, was they needed to have a reserve so that if students came back to the state, they would have money to provide to the schools for that ADM increase.
Rachel, is that formula something from the 60s?
Yeah.
You know, have they updated it and reevaluated it?
They have made changes to the formula. I mean, the formula's been around for a long time. I'm trying to think. They made changes to the poverty, how they assess poverty in the formula, I think 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it was just before the pandemic. But generally, the only changes that they make to the state school fund are larger carve outs for different grants. But as far as like the formula itself and trying to get more money into the formula, they generally don't make those changes.
Okay, thank you.
Ballot Measure 5 is where that formula came from, because it's about statewide equalization. Reedsport used to be one of the richest school districts in Oregon because of all the timber dollars in the mills and just number of dollars per student. It was one of the richest. And when they started equalizing it, Reedsport as a community just lost. And a lot of stuff went out in the mills.
When was Measure 5?
Ballot Measure 5.
When?
Oh, I remember as a kid. So that'd be the 90s. What was Ballot Measure 5? Anybody? Quiz time. In the 90s?
No idea.
So long ago, we remember it, but not.
It kind of came at the same time that timber receipts were tapering off. So it was sort of a double-edged sword of
Yes.
reduction for districts like Reedsport that had been so well financed before. I have a question about, we had talked a little bit during the meeting about looking at other or new revenue streams, John.
Mhm.
I don't know that that's going to really make much of a difference, but when we talk about 5,000 here or 6,000 there, is the district looking at areas where historically, or at least recently, we have been very supportive of, various programs and maybe been very generous in a way that other districts may not be, or, isn't typical.
We've
been atypically generous in some ways.
sports
And
fees comes to mind.
sports fees, Head Start,
I've not been charging Head Start any rent because it's our kids.
Right.
They're gonna come right in, is the assumption to our program.
Right.
I mean, there probably are some things we can shore up because we need to pay attention to those penny levels. I used to sort of think being a good neighbor or serving our students, we know we have a community that's defined as a poverty district. And so charging a sport fee felt like something we could absorb.
right.
That's something we probably have to look at. And if that's, if the board is saying we need to go back to that for a while, we can.
Well, and I look at, one of the things I look at is how we partner with other community members and groups. We have the boosters, we have Reef, and how can we maybe look to those partners to say, we don't want to impact the students, but we really do need to be, capturing revenue from where we can. Does that make sense? Like, how do we offset maybe some of those things with partnerships?
I appreciate Reef and our sports boosters tremendously. And when I think about the type of opportunities that they provide us, I kind of lump it all together as one-offs. I think it would be unfair to go to those two organizations for a sustainable expectation. And I think they're super generous. And if we have something we identify and they have the ability to support us with those purchases, and it won't be an ongoing expense for them, they've been very generous time and time again. So I think about them cautiously. I appreciate what they do. And if there are opportunities for things that I would describe as a one-off, one-time expense without a recurring element of cost to it, those would be things to ask them about and see what their willingness is, because it does depend on their willingness to do it.
Right.
Furloughs may impact their thinking process of how they want to support, and they may have a different plan too. So, it's obviously something to think about.
Yeah.
This is probably a Rachel or John or Josh question, but John talked about in our current staffing, how almost 5 years less experience than what we had pre-COVID. Does that affect us, cost us money because of that?
Yes, it doesn't cost us money. It decreases our revenue.
And how
Significantly?
yeah, kind of where are we, is it a substantial amount or is it a trace amount or? Don't leave.
I'm not leaving. My binder. I'm getting my notes here.
Getting the Bible out.
So, if we look at what we had for last year per ADMW for that and what we have right now, so it is it's about $150 less per ADMW. So $123,000 for this current year.
I have two schools of thought about that. I think the reason they design it that way is an assumption that a less experienced teacher costs the district less in payroll salary. I think that's the reasoning. There might be an argument that the resources and supports that a young teacher needs to be successful to stay in the profession deserves a higher level of investment.
Right.
I've had the opportunity to talk to Boomer Wright, our representative, the following day. I got 15 minutes with the Department of Education Director, Dr. Charlene Williams. and some lobbyists with OSBA and more coming. The 1A and 2A school districts, because we are so small, I think deserve some minimums, some caps that no matter what, you won't go below this type of number, because a fluctuation of $100,000 impacts us. A fluctuation of $1 million, I mean, that puts us into the crisis we have. And I call this a crisis. This is nothing less than a crisis right now. And those kinds of fluctuations that we can't predict and that drastically affect operating costs the way they are here is devastating to our system. And I believe our formula, I believe our economists should do better and say, at a formula level, small schools will be capped at a minimum so that they always rely on at least this amount. I think we can build that into a formula. I'm not the greatest math guy, but it makes sense. You can have some set values in your outcomes.
Yeah, like your school districts can absorb the shock better than.
Absolutely. We average 2 teachers per grade level, kinder through 6, and then 2 English teachers, 2 social studies teachers. That's kind of our pattern. As our enrollment has gone down and we have fewer students, we could probably squeeze all of those kids into one teacher and run it 34, 35, 36 kids in the room, but that's huge. That's
You
really
never
tough.
keep a teacher in that room.
Never keep a
That's,
teacher.
that
So-
is just,
I need about a half a teacher more, but there's no such thing as a half a teacher. If you have a teacher in a classroom, it's a second room, but you don't have enough students and enough money coming in to fill that. And so just capping some minimums that we can at least know that we won't go below this point. We can build the base of the budget around that, and then extra above, you put supports and auxiliaries against. I don't know. I railed on for quite a bit, and they shook their head, and I don't know how much listening that turns into action. I know there's no bailouts coming. I wish
So-
there was, but
but do you think that the legislature is hearing from their constituents right now?
I think
that-
Salem and Portland are getting some airtime.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that what Oregon does is really sits down and takes a look at how archaic the model is and how it doesn't really serve smaller districts. It doesn't serve larger districts, they're.
Districts with old buildings, aging facilities.
Mhm.
Nothing in the state school fund or the formula is designed for us to put money into our aging facilities.
Mhm.
So if you're huge and can eventually get to the point you can pop out a new building every 3 years,
Mhm.
or you're in an area that bonds very easily, fantastic. But small rural Oregon, which more than half the state has these small school districts and aging facilities, probably because the schools have been there since the town was there, and nothing really in the formula that's designed to actively invest into the facility. So when our air handler goes up, and that's $75,000, before this even happened, we're like, oh geez, how are we gonna do this? Well, we're gonna not spend any money on asbestos abatement, because even though we've got a schedule to get that taken care of and clean that up, we'll just stop it for 1 year and we'll do the air handler. Aging facilities are killers, and that's a surprise element of its own. We're gonna be in a budget committee meeting May 8th. We're gonna predict our staff salaries and our program needs and have no way to guess what's gonna happen with the facilities and those costs. And we're gonna say, well, we think it's this much money we're gonna need.
We live in a,
Yeah, because, I mean, it's the state and their infamous stupidity, because I remember going to when I was on the board before, 8 or 9 years ago, we talked about this at OSBA conference, that, and they said that schools our size, districts our size, 1A, 2A type, you'd be lucky to keep a young teacher or a new teacher 3 years, and they'd be moving to a bigger school, a bigger district, so where the money was and the more opportunity and room for advancement. And here we are, 24 and we're still fighting and living with the same thing. So we're not learning anything at the state level, obviously. So here we are.
I'm concerned about the volume of layoffs statewide. Everybody who is in an education program right now is in a minority. Education programs are not getting a lot of students out of high school to go into them. And we're having to do grow your own models to try to find educators. So everybody who went through a program in the colleges and universities right now is coming out looking for a job. The state's laying everybody off. So in an undesirable college program, the people coming out are going, I got nothing. You'd be back to working at fast food, trying to pay off my college debt. An undesirable profession just got hammered in a lack of jobs because the layoffs are going to push people who had jobs out. That's doing nothing to make our education system at a state level and possibly a national level look appealing to people going into college now. This is going to be a prolonged problem. What I want to offer out is I have seen a level of activity in staff and the associations that is admirable. They are working together, they are talking and communicating, and over, I wholeheartedly believe that the staff we have are concerned about students, concerned about school, are concerned about how to keep what we have to the level that we can, and they care. There's absolutely no argument about that. We have a staff who cares, and this is something that as we go through it, I believe we will be able to navigate because we have a staff like we do, who cares about what this is going to look like and how it's going to turn out.
That's an argument for local control. The bureaucracy is too big and inefficient. It's part of the problem. Take care of ourselves. Get rid of the NEA and all that crap.
The
Focus on that.
Portland public way of doing this is that they're going to have spreadsheets of names, and for Salem Kaiser specifically, 400 cuts in this newest round. They're just going to start at the bottom and start crossing names off until they address 400 positions. Anything that we do here in terms of cuts is deeply personal because we know all these people. We know their faces and their names. We know who they are. We know about their lives. They're not just names on a spreadsheet. And any of this is going to hurt in the worst way because these are our people that we see every day. They're our neighbors, our friends, and nothing good is coming out of this.
I know this is probably a third rail, but Rachel, do we know how much special education costs our district as a percentage of total?
We don't know it off the top of our head, but I'm sure that Josh could kind of get an estimate from the budget because he's the budget expert right now. I'm just a cheerleader on the sidelines.
100 kids are
1% of our 25%. Yeah. So
is that,
But that's all of our IEPs,
Yeah.
right? 504s, and let's, Not 504.
Not 504s.
Okay.
Sometimes special education can be communication, and a student who gets 20 minutes a week, some instruction, but really that's not a high cost activity because it's there. Other students might have more intensive needs and will be and do cost more. Our life skills program, each student in that, the slots that we have to purchase from the ESD is $42,000 a seat, $42,000 per kiddo. So just at a per cost unit level, that is a expensive program. And I think Rachel, 17 slots, is that?
Yes, for next year.
So
And that's determined by the state.
No, that's by our actual students that we need to serve at the appropriate levels. And those slots, it's a fixed rate. If students were to move away and we didn't need that many slots, we would get a refund. We don't pay and then lose it. They charge us for what we actually use. But our ESD contracts, including life skills, is 15% of our budget. And life skills was about 7.5% of the budget. It's a very expensive program because in order for the ESD to run it, obviously a teacher, instructional assistants, but then there's augmentative communication, occupational therapy, physical therapy, there's nursing services.
In
There's
the district, we're paying for that.
yeah, it's all lumped into that cost, but it's, so if we said we can do it cheaper on our own, and when I first got to Reedsport, they made a move to pull life skills. And I don't want life skills to be the sore subject here because that's not the.
And I'm not saying that, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get information.
But for the people who are watching online, I don't want to sound like
I'm
I'm,
not,
yeah.
I'm just trying to understand.
When Reedsport, when I got here, Reedsport had pulled life skills back in as a cost savings. When they do that though, you still have to purchase augmented communication. You still have to purchase occupational and physical therapy. You still have to purchase nursing. And those are still at the contracted rates that the ESD has. So whether we lump it in as a per student purchase that's kind of factored out, or we have to make individual purchases of a whole person at a higher cost, it probably is.
So on those students that are in those programs, their quality of education is determined by the state. The state says you should have this plan, this plan, this plan, you have to have amount of life skills, you have to have this and that. Are we being dictated to on what we have to provide for these 20% of the kids?
No, IEPs are a local team decision.
Okay,
Yeah. So who is this kid? What needs does this kiddo have? And what is the best way to support this kiddo getting their education? And it's the local staff and the local parent and the kid, and it's a
and they
very
formulate a
custom.
plan.
Yes, okay, it's a very customized plan to that student based on us, and nobody from the state is coming in over the top of that.
Okay,
Rachel and Josh, I'm assuming that you're gonna come in here on May 8th and have a budget ready for our committee. But when you bring that, are you gonna have 2 or 3 alternate plans to go with it? Because what happens if you do all this work with the original budget that you're put together now, and our committee goes, oh no, not even acceptable. Is there things that you're gonna be able to change singularly into the budget to make it look, better, that, we could pass it? Or are you gonna have to take it back home and start all over?
We have a second.
So, a couple of things. I misspoke to John yesterday when I thought that I was going to be able to be in attendance at the May 8th meeting. I cannot. I already have another budget meeting scheduled for May 8th. So the first meeting will be Josh in attendance. And then for the second meeting on the 29th, Josh already had some scheduled time away. So then you'll be stuck with me for the second meeting. As far as options or alternates, no, we will not have options or alternates. We will have the direction and the guidance that we are given to build the budget and make sure it's balanced to present to the budget committee. And then, any basis of a budget is personnel costs. And so if we're looking at program changes, we have to look at not only the cost of the discretionary funds, but also the personnel costs. So we would have to go back and make those changes and then bring it back to the second meeting to talk about what that looks like. I do have a question for the board, though. It is customary to have an expectation from the board to have 2 weeks to review the document before the budget meeting. So 2 weeks is next Wednesday. I think that it would be miraculous for us to have decisions made that would allow us to have a balanced budget ready and a document provided by next Wednesday. I mean, I'm hoping there's probably some understanding in that. It takes a couple of days to get the document put together and then printed. So we're talking about having a budget finalized by Monday morning. And I just don't think that that is a reasonable expectation. Am I correct or incorrect on that, John?
I would hope for if we can have the budget document with a week to the budget committee prior to that date, that gives us an extra week to keep working through what we think are systematic, programmatic, and then eventual personnel changes. When we bring it, Carrie, you're right. That's the proposal. And that's what we think is the recommended approach to take next year. That committee does get to look at it. And just like I said, area A to area Z, we want this moved here, this amount of money moved over here. So it's going to come from these areas. And then it'll be our job to explain, okay, we have it proposed this way, doing these moves to backfill over here has these types of impacts. The budget committee is going to need to say, is this still what we want to do? Rachel and Josh will go back, come back on the 29th, show it to you again. We can have 3 or 4 or 5 budget committee meetings, but every move and shuffle will probably have an impact and require some review. And at a scale level, just if you move $1 million, you just cross the line through it and add it to the piece of paper. You can probably track in the meeting what you are looking at. We will reprint it, bring it in, to be sure this is what folks want on the 29th before trying to take it to the school board for adoption. Josh Cook, you had said something about maybe trying to start a little earlier. I don't think this is going to be the quick, easy process of the past. You know, we might need a little more time, or if there is not an extensive board agenda that night, maybe cancel that board meeting to allow a continuation of the budget meeting. Maybe we just pause, do the accolade section that we need to do, quick 30-minute board meeting, and then resume the budget meeting. There might be some of those elements we should consider.
So Rachel and Josh, if would the 1st or 2nd of May, if you would get it to the committee by then, is that doable or still not doable?
No, I think a week is doable. And I think the biggest piece of asking for this is, you know, really also allowing administration to make decisions. That way we don't rush into anything. You know, we really want to listen to all the concerns everyone's expressing, look at every option, give some people potentially thoughts to us before then, you know, before even the budget committee. I mean, we really want to explore and look at everything thoroughly. But I think a week ahead of time is, what is that Monday?
May 1st?
May 1st.
Well,
Yeah.
That Monday is, yeah.
The 29th.
Yeah.
So you will have to forgive me. I'm a little bit bleary-eyed. I was looking at the wrong month. I actually will be at the budget meeting on May 8th. My apologies.
Rachel,
losing my mind.
You guys have done it between as much as anything for the last 2 weeks. You are forgiven. This has been hard. It's been taxing. I've been watching the union leadership trying to keep up. I've been trying to keep up. It is wearing people completely down to the nub. This has been hard.
So yeah, I think the 29th, 30th, that Monday, Tuesday, if the board is acceptable with that, is reasonable.
Okay, that's doable then, yeah. I think I'll speak for the board and they can beat me up later if I'm wrong, but I think we can, I mean, as much as everybody's putting into this, and I've attended some of the meetings that John has met at the school with and stuff, and I think if everybody else can do it, I think the board can do it also. And I relayed that to the person I invited to be on the budget committee this year, and she understood, and she's willing, you know, to do whatever it's gonna take and put in the extra time. She was real, I mean, she was real thoughtful with that sense. So yeah, I think if we had it a week ahead of time, we'll just dive into it and get working on it.
And
yeah, we'd appreciate the week.
perfect. And I think the second part to that, kind of like John said, is, I mean, I would really like to make myself available as long as possible on that first budget meeting night to also not rush through it. We can dive into it. So I do think if the potential is there, it's important to extend that as long as we can.
And we could start earlier.
I have a question. I don't think we could. Wasn't there some conflict with starting earlier?
You have a
Jonesy.
doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
We can't stop, we can't start earlier because we have an adopted budget calendar with that start time at 4 o'clock. Another option is to adjourn the budget meeting. If we have, if we want to do some part of the board meeting, we can adjourn the budget meeting, do accolades, maybe consent agenda, and push off action until the following month. And then we can adjourn the board meeting and go back into the budget meeting until the budget committee is done.
Were you aware of any actionable items at this point?
Not.
I mean, if there aren't any, if it's possible to just
Push into May.
push into May. Oh, well, that
Or
will
the
be
May 15th.
June.
Yeah.
push
Oh, yeah.
into June and just have a really tight board meeting and then come back to it. I mean, that's,
So I just want to say on that piece, and you guys can decide, I just, we are not having school that week now of the board meeting. So if we're having accolades and students aren't in school, I'm sorry,
There's school that week.
June 10th?
Yeah, the furlough is May 20 through 23.
and then June furlough.
Oh, the June board
Yes.
meeting. I'm sorry, I'm in May.
I know. I know we're all confused on calendars right now. I totally get it. So if we have accolades from May, if we're pushing them into June instead of having the board meeting, we don't have school that week. So I don't think we have the expectations that we could have teachers come and present at the board meeting.
Right. Well, we might be able to run through at least the accolade portion and recognizing students.
Can you run your June accolades into your May? Can you give everybody enough of a heads up?
We could talk to
Put the-
staff about that. That's a good,
Yeah.
that's a good suggestion.
So we do all of the accolades in May and we don't have to worry about that piece. So question for you.
Question, yes.
Dumb question. How do we run a board meeting if we don't have a facility to run it in?
Okay, I spoke a little bit to staff about this last night. The buildings aren't closed. There's no magical barrier. I will be here for the board meeting. I can't require staff, and if I need to get pre-taught on how to turn the machine on and where to put the placards, I will do that. We can prep agendas in advance. So keeping that date is a realistic possibility.
The lights on? I mean,
Yeah.
we're still paying the bills. You're adding to the utility burden of that moment. Is that acceptable?
We can take a Friday off and close the building. I mean, one of the things that we realized between myself and Mike Shoppy, we cannot furlough the same days. One of us has to be able to answer the fire alarm, deal with the police chief, and deal with that emergency level. So before June 30th, he and I need to get 8 furlough days, and there's just some logistical component.
I have a dumb question. Your salary's furloughed.
Yep.
Is your ability to do work furloughed? It's
Yeah.
just a,
No,
like, consider yourself a salaried employee. You're,
If I was a hardcore union person, I would say, they're not paying me, I'm not working.
uh-huh.
I have a realistic expectation, especially as a superintendent, that there's a high level of responsibility that I carry, and
Uh-huh.
some things have to get done.
Uh-huh.
And
They do.
if that means I need to do it, then that's what it is. I get paid for the year. I will take the deduction of pay for the 8 days, and I would probably still be in here doing stuff.
So just want to reiterate that you're not getting paid for that
I
time,
will not be
but
getting
you're
paid.
still willing to do some of the work.
There's stuff that has to
That's a
happen.
commitment level that I appreciate, and I want that understood, that you're,
Well, don't be beating it into him because he might change his mind.
well,
No.
he's already committed to it. I've got it on tape.
So when's the furlough? May?
March 20 through the 23rd.
Oh, me.
Man,
I'm sorry, geez. Down to the nut, right?
Yeah.
May 20 through 23rd.
Okay.
May 20 through 23. That's Monday through Thursday.
May,
20 through the 23.
okay,
And then June 10 through 13. That's the last week of school normally.
June 10th.
10 through 13. Graduation is June 9th. Graduation is not a furlough activity. People are coming in from out of town. They've been making plans for months, we assume.
For years.
yeah, we're not denying their seniors and graduation.
And that was when you guys are talking to people in the community, that was a bit of a press. The immediate logic is you furlough the last 2 weeks of school.
Mhm.
That sandwiches graduation. All the preparation that needs to go into that graduation on Sunday the 9th happens the week prior. So that's not a good furlough week. And then the week before that is outdoor school. So the reason it's May 20th is because there's enough activities in that 2 week window that happen at the end of a school year that are trying to be preserved. None of the days are good days. All the choices are bad.
So all sports activities ceases to exist?
Most of the regular season stuff is done.
Okay,
If our baseball team, which is doing very well right now, makes it to the state playoffs, that might occur in that window of May 20 through 23. Our coaches are stipend positions. Stipends are not furloughed.
okay.
Transportation.
The fields, there's no light, it's outside. Realistically, those can probably happen if the OSAA says this is what it is, you're stuck with it. We don't have those brackets yet. We think we know approximately when they are, but it's not set. So transportation, if it's a home game, we don't know. There's just a lot of what ifs. I had a really nice phone call today with Scott Lewis, who's in charge of the transportation department. And he has done budget cuts and furloughs with this district before, and basically a pledge of support out of him that he's going to help us do the right thing to control costs. He and I were initially talking about reviewing and helping his budget out. He says he's going to wait and is backed off. He's always been a person who has shown loyalty and commitment to our district. So if we need to figure some of those things out, we will. Those are pretty small components of what the furlough day is costing and saving. But right now they're not known and predictable, so we'll have to kind of wait and see. All right, what questions are you guys getting hit with in the grocery store or on the telephone that have been difficult to answer? Maybe there's some talking points we can share to get to help you with some of that stuff.
I haven't been to the grocery store in a week.
I haven't been here for 2, so
I don't know, I haven't read anybody,
Okay.
just that little thing that Rod put on, sent all the board members. Oh, there, it was just, whatever.
The school district website has a whole tab right now called furlough information. Every time we're getting something, we're archiving it there. It's gonna stay there for as long as it takes. Tell people are aware of what information is available to them.
So all the students, all the teachers know what's going on.
We want to be, if this video goes on our YouTube page, we'll link it there, just to be sure it is consolidated in that one easy to find spot.
We, yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing with folks is, you know, I've got several phone calls, a couple of emails, a couple, you know, walk-ups, and I'm just referring them to the website, and, you know, that all the answers are there, and superintendents meet with, and administrators meet with the unions and the staff and stuff, and that's all on there also, so that's been, you know, pretty well received for the most part.
I'm committed to answering the questions. It's a lot of work. It's very fast. I know that the rate of answers are probably not quite as satisfactory as folks want, but I will get there. I'm not going to stop. It's been a full 7-day work week, but we'll get there.
Do we want to entertain any questions from the audience?
Typically, work sessions
We
don't,
don't.
and we don't advertise it as such, so I would again, if folks want to send questions into the district, we will answer them. We will commit to putting them on our website. Union leaders have been excellent about funneling information from their membership to us. I know there's more questions out there. We've been encouraging outside the box ideas. There's no action, but just a concept of discussion. Here's an example. One suggestion was the district office should be solely leased out. Either a source of one-time revenue or leased for revenue. The functions of the district office should occur through the school buildings. We have to probably give that a line of thinking and run through that exercise of, okay, what do we have here? Can it live in the buildings if we lease out this space?
3 days?
Well, no, for a
Talking about long-term solution.
for several years in the long-term impact. But that was, I hadn't thought of that at the point I was moving and the thinking we've been doing and just going as fast as we can. That wasn't one that hit my brain yet. So people offering out outside the box ideas, have you considered this, are super appreciated. Don't be afraid to ask, and we will throw them into the list of everything we're trying to consider.
I assume you're pretty good about giving the rationale for the decision or the line of thinking. So if somebody has a question and you have an answer to it, you will tell them why you think that way or why you answer that way, rather than just,
Yes,
giving people basic answers.
Yes, and I'm learning that repetition is still needed. Just because I've explained it one time doesn't mean that all the pieces have clicked or that I articulated it sufficiently to help the person understand, or they were able to understand that information at that point. Sometimes people are asking questions initially, they're just mad and they're not really hearing me.
Sure.
And I get it and I agree. So having a second or third go around with the questions as they are able to process it differently and better, it helps. So repetition has been important.
Did you say, are there going to be any other opportunities for question and answer sessions?
As many as it takes. Individually, yes, and Charmin is trying to get me just a time where we'll announce the superintendent will be in an open session. Anybody who wants to come, we'll advertise it and we'll do my best. we've offered those in the past and we haven't got a lot of takers, but this has been the biggest thing
Yeah.
in my tenure here. So.
What, I know you already answered this for me and, in my, for some reason I forgot to answer. What, we talked about, the class action lawsuit against the state.
Several people besides you had mentioned that several years ago, the state of Washington, the superintendents of the state of Washington sued the state of Washington for a failure to follow the Constitution to properly fund the schools of Washington. Washington against Washington. And they won. About the same time, Oregon was cast the same light, and they passed, don't quote me on this, Senate Bill 1, that basically was a legal requirement to properly fund the schools in Oregon. And if the schools in a given year are not properly funded, a report has to be written and submitted to the legislator explaining why. Which, very biased opinion, is sort of a cop-out.
Yeah.
That they can just write a report and continually underfund education, and that makes it okay. So the ability to win a lawsuit to force them to fund it, I'm not sure that it had an impact for Washington outside of the novelty of calling attention to it. But in Oregon, they skirted that lawsuit and passed a law, and they write the report every year, which is a bummer. It's just passing on. There is a approximately 20% rainy day reserve, rainy day fund in the state of Oregon right now. And it just continues to build every year. And they're not really dipping into it. And I think if they start reallocating or redesigning their formula, how they fund schools, with some important realizations of what it takes for small districts, for rural districts, for districts with aging facilities, and spend some of those dollars, I think we can still operate the state just fine and spend down a little of that. 20% feels greedy. 8 to 10% probably is realistic for the big stuff.
Is there a, leadership movement? I mean, I know that, houselessness has been high on the sort of government level, the governor's level of interest and focus. Is this shining a spotlight on education in a way that you think will have an impactful change on how the Oregon funds? And are they going to wake up and realize that,
I'm skeptical because the statements I'm reading from Governor Kotek of taking a serious look at the funding formula and how we fund schools in Oregon doesn't give me any indication of what her plan is to make the change. And saying we're going to look at the problem, that's what politicians say to dodge and evade. So I'm not anticipating a bailout or a real strong effort to do anything any different because there are competing interests all around. We have great roads. If we had roads like Idaho, we'd have more money for our state school funds, in my opinion. But we need the tourism apparently. So there's some.
But we don't make the tourists pay for any of the things they buy here. So, I mean,
Yeah,
there's.
I think it's roughly 40% of the state budget goes to schools. 42 would be nice. That'd be a pretty significant swing. And that reinvestment could be done at a formula level, maybe some minimums for small schools, maybe some more attention paid to actual special education populations, money to help with aging facilities so that we're not fighting unpredictable costs year after year when we're just trying to operate schools on the minimum money they give us. this is touching on a nerve for me.
Well, I'm saying, we're talking about the 20% of the rainy day fund. All they have to do is look out the door, and we're in a situation where we got hurricane force winds and a tsunami right here facing us right now. So yeah, it'd be a good time for the rainy day funds for sure.
Be a good time. Well, and as Rachel alluded, they're keeping a little money back because they're worried that these 10,000 students in Oregon will suddenly return and they're going to need to make bigger payouts. Okay.
Aren't those numbers of, I guess this is a kind of, Rachel, Josh, maybe you know, Oregon has sort of an idea of how many students were lost during the pandemic. We don't know where they went. They didn't come back into enrollments. You know, there's no way to really monitor. Is that true nationally? I mean, do our numbers play out across 50 states?
I don't know the answer to that. Is Oregon?
I don't have any factual background on that, but I know that is something that has been discussed at the national level about the same trend in other states. Although if you talk to the U-Haul people, everybody from Oregon that moved away went to Texas, Florida, and Idaho because that's where all their rentals went to. So I suspect that's where those students are.
Thank you for the levity, Rachel.
I don't know if it's levity, it's pretty true.
I listened to a podcast. He was very adamant that he moved to Texas during COVID because of the politics and what was allowed, not allowed, and how he wanted things to be. And so Texas was his place. I've heard that.
My son moved to Tennessee.
How are we doing on questions and thinkings and needs for talking points? And I don't want to rail on.
Well, I'm just gonna sit here kind of patiently and impatiently wait for the budget so we can dive into that, but
John, are you, I know that we've all given you our budget committee member lists. Is the district opening to broadening the budget committee membership at this point, or is it too late? I'm just, to make that call again to the folks who like to armchair.
I would review what our requirements are before I feel comfortable answering that.
Okay.
Any insight, Rachel, Josh?
Are you talking about budget committee members?
Yes.
If 3 people show up on the day of the budget committee and say, I want to be on the budget committee, I know that there's processes of having to interview and select members, but I think
I don't know that I would necessarily recommend taking members day of, but if there are people out there who are hearing, we have a community budget committee membership every year, this time of year, and they're interested in joining us, could they do that now?
So your budget committee member number cannot exceed the number of board seats. So the maximum you can have on the budget committee is 10, 5 board and 5 community members.
We're short, right? We don't have all those seats filled. Well, the last time I heard we had
I need to see
8.
what Sharman's had turned into her.
Yeah, I would say we've got available seats.
I thought we had a full budget committee.
I haven't seen that information, and I could be dead wrong, but the last report I got, we were a few short. Because I remember being surprised by it.
There you go.
So you have an open seat. Do you have somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it might be your seat that's open.
Jerry Ewan is chiming in that 24% nationwide students not returning.
24%?
Yeah, and so 10%, I don't know what Oregon's student off the top of my head. I think we're up in 6 digits. So I don't know what 10,000 is, what percentage of our state. I know the number's over 10,000 students, but Jerry's hearing that nationally, 24% of the students
24% of the students.
have not returned to school.
So either they're homeschooled, they're private schooled,
Private
or they're
charter.
undereducated.
Yeah. Private
Or they're
online
working
charter.
at Burger King in California for $20 an hour in the minimum wage town.
Which hasn't kept up with the cost of living, so
Yeah.
you're talking it would be 24 if it actually was in line with cost of living, so.
Statewide enrollment is just under 540,000.
Okay.
So you said, John, just to reiterate, size of district does not matter in the formula. There is no discretion for size. It's all based on the same formula numbers.
I'm pretty sure.
Is that true?
Don't know the formula that in depth.
So you could extrapolate the formula based on the numbers and the budget?
So the formula for the state school fund is written directly on the state school fund estimates. It doesn't, I'm not sure what you mean by size. So if we're talking student size, yes, that matters because it depends on your students and your weights. So if
Right.
you have a district that has high poverty, then they have extra weights. If you have a district like Porton Public, they probably don't have as high of poverty. So they don't get the same weights, but they have more local revenue, but that's offset by the state school fund. So there are many, many factors that go into the formula. The funding ratio is determined every biennium based on the numbers that the legislature puts out for the budget for the schools in the state school fund. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 12 carve-outs from the state school fund formula that equate to about 65 million from the state school fund just off the top. So for instance, we have high cost disability grant. The carve out for that is 55 million for the biennium. So when we have high cost students, they say, oh yeah, you get reimbursed or you get extra money for anything over $30,000 in costs. So when you originally put your estimate in, they pay you about 58% of that cost over 30%. So if your costs come in higher than that estimated amount, then you are reimbursed again, but it's only 49% of that amount. So you get about 52% of your reimbursement overall for any excess over 30,000.
There is one available budget committee member seat at this time.
Do we have to have somebody?
It behooves us to have more people involved.
Because the purpose of that group is to, the quorum to pass it out of that committee is to be 6. We have to have 6 votes. And to have representation so that when the community says, how'd you build this budget, who got the input, and to have some variety of voices so that all voices get heard in developing our community's school budget. So. And we've struggled to fill it every year. We've gone a couple of years, we've had 7 total.
If you only need 6 to pass it.
6 voting the same way is the quorum number with it. We'll pass it forward.
I'm actually, Bob, do you have any, I mean, you seem to be very interested in budgets and numbers and financing in the schools. I'm surprised that you don't have someone in mind.
I don't. My friends don't have any skin in the game, really. I could probably find a golf buddy or something, but I don't know if it necessarily adds to the conversation. So if we have 9, we still need 6 to pass.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So do you want to offer your seat up to the community to take a volunteer?
should we throw it out there at large?
We're still looking for a seat and we could do, a request for.
Well, Josh or Rachel, do you have anything in there, anything to add that we may or may not need going forward?
I know for me personally, I think I've exhausted the level of knowledge and background that I have to share in the last week.
Yeah, nothing I can think of at the moment. My mind is so focused on payroll right now. So,
Payroll is coming out Friday, Thursday.
Did we adjust for April as well, into
People
April?
were given the individual option. Some folks would prefer to wait and have it taken out of their last check so they can make planning. A few people want to take it all out in their April and be done, rip the Band-Aid off. And over half of people have selected to distribute over as many remaining paychecks as they get. And some people are getting either 2 or 3 or 4 paychecks between now and the end of the fiscal year. So equally dividing the impact of the furlough over the checks is one of their options.
So we're allowing a individual source?
Yeah, we made it available. They could reply individually based on their household need. And it already stinks if they can help determine how to feel the impact. We want that because it's already bad.
I assume that came from Josh and
I think
Josh
I
and
think the
Rachel.
union leadership asked if that was a possibility, and Josh and Rachel jumped right in. They absolutely made it happen.
They made it happen, and I
They made it
appreciate
happen.
that. I think it's tremendous to be able to allow your staff to kind of self-actualize and help determine where.
Again, the leaders of the union brought it to us, totally fair ask. And then Josh and Rachel being able to do the extra work at this point to make that
thank
happen.
you.
Jumping in, realizing it was needed. So our communication is acted on.
I know this doesn't have anything to do with budget, but have you had an opportunity in all this to sit down with the police chief and talk about security for our buildings during the time that they're not being, used and there's nobody inside for security reasons?
I haven't, but we are gonna need to let them know these are the furlough days, either contacting John Zielinski or Michael Shoppy, depending on who is gonna be covering.
Okay, good, yeah.
We need police and fire for sure to know that. And we also need to get that list.
Just one more question. Have you heard of any community-based programs being put together, offered to help with child care / he's running to get his, must be a yes. For anybody listening, John has left the building or left the room to.
I don't know,
He ran away.
I don't know how you forward that, but hopefully.
Okay, yes, there are several groups in our community who are wanting to provide support to staff in general for furloughs. to children needing a place to go during
Okay.
furloughs, to feeding students during furloughs. There's a lot of groundswell. I got handed a flyer today. This is for the Reedsport Church of God. And I am willing to, any of these programs that are going to help our students or our staff in furlough
Mhm.
to help distribute,
Mhm.
regardless of which entity is providing it. So there will be probably some faith-based entities chipping in,
Mhm.
and I think I'm going to provide that communication.
And again, all we're doing is providing the communication portion. And it's up to the parents and the care providers of students to be able to determine where their kids go during furlough. So this is not a school-supported, quote unquote, but we're partnering with our community.
I appreciate the action that our community takes to support our students, our schools, our staff. And this is just one example, but I got handed a flyer today. This is from the Reedsport Church of God.
Is it the Lower Umpqua Ministerial Association?
No, church.
But Luma's part of that.
Yeah, Reedsport Church of God is part of Luma.
Right.
Yeah, and all the, it's the ministerial association, all the pastors and ministers in our area
Mhm.
probably are in Luma. I think they meet weekly. It's a pretty robust group. This particular one is 9 to 3:30. There's up to K-8. They're wanting high school kids to help. They're looking to employ some instructional assistants. So
They're gonna do it on site.
on their property, which is
Right.
across from the football field.
Mhm.
And just, and I, in talking with some of their people, they're in communication with other churches who are trying to help with this. And I had members of the community asking and offering the same thing. So when I'm directing people, I want to kind of get them together so that they're not all trying to replicate the same thing at the expense of each other. If working together would make a more robust outcome. So yes, there are things happening, and with everything else going on, this is kind of a side effort to try and point people together so they're all getting done what they're trying to do effectively.
And they're gonna start to publicize on their own once they've got everything.
They want to send these flyers out tomorrow and backpacks of kids
Mhm.
in those Wednesday folders. So for the purpose of communication sharing, I'm going to support them.
We can also share that in our email. Can we share that?
We'll share
So it
it out.
goes out to,
I think there will be more,
Mhm.
but this is the first flyer I've seen. I've heard conversation up to this point otherwise.
Good. Thank
Bobby,
you.
anything else?
Good.
Jack?
Good.
Curio?
No, I just appreciate all of our community members who are pulling together. It's a tremendous effort, and it was what I was hoping for when we talked at our board meeting.
Rachel or Josh? Anything in closing?
No, sir.
Nothing further.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I hope you all have a good and safe evening. I'm going to adjourn now.